I publicly shamed my boyfriend at a party to make him pay attention to me. Now he's gone and I'm realizing I was the monster all along. The silence was the first thing that hit me. Not the gentle, sleepy quiet of a Sunday morning, but a deep, hollow silence that felt like it was pressing in on my eardrums. My head throbbed in a painful rhythm and my mouth tasted like stale wine and regret. I rolled over, reaching for Aiden, but my hand met only cold, empty sheets. That's when the panic started, a cold trickle that turned into a flood. I stumbled out of bed, my vision swimming. His side of the closet was half empty, the hangers clinking together forlornly. In the bathroom, his toothbrush was gone. The bright blue one that always sat next to my pink one. The entire holder looked ridiculously empty now, like a gappy, pathetic smile. His worn-out sneakers, the ones he always left right by the door that I always tripped over, were gone. The space where they should have been was just clean floor. My phone screen lit up with a single brutal notification. It was from him, sent hours ago while I was passed out. It wasn't angry, it wasn't sad, it was worse, it was logistical. I've packed my essentials. Text me a time next week when I can come for the rest of my things. Please don't call. My mind flashed with jagged, ugly images from last night. The blur of faces at Ethan's party, the sound of my own voice, shrill and accusing, and Aiden's face. God, his face, it wasn't the anger I expected. It was a look of utter, devastating shame. What did I say? What did I do? The details were a sick, swirling mess, but the feeling was crystal clear. I had set off a bomb, and now I was standing alone in the crater. Aiden was sunshine. That's the only way to describe him. He was one of those people who walked into a room and it just tilted slightly in his direction. He had this easy, booming laugh and a genuine interest in everyone he met, from the barista to his boss. People didn't just like Aiden, they were drawn to him like he was the center of gravity. He was the human equivalent of a golden retriever, all boundless optimism and uncomplicated affection. He remembered birthdays, asked about your sick cat, and could turn a 5-minute chat with a stranger into a lifelong friendship. And then there was me. I grew up in a house where emotions were inconvenient messes to be cleaned up and put away. Affection was a rare currency, and praise was always followed by a but. I learned to be quiet, to observe, to make myself small so I wouldn't be a bother. When I met Aiden, it was like stepping out of a dark, cold room into the full glare of a summer day. He saw me, really saw me, and he didn't seem to mind the quiet, anxious person hiding in the corner. He pulled me into his light, and for a while it felt like I was finally warm. But the warmth started to feel like a burn. Being with Aiden meant being surrounded by his world, a world filled with people just as bright and effortless as he was. His friends were all successful, witty, and so damn confident. When we were at parties or dinners, I felt like an imposter, a poorly crafted counterfeit slipped into a collection of masterpieces. I'd sit there nursing a drink, trying to follow their rapid-fire banter, my own thoughts a tangled knot of inadequacy. I'd rehearse a sentence in my head a dozen times, and by the time I was ready to say it, the conversation had moved on. Aiden, bless his heart, would always try to include me. He'd wrap an arm around me, pull me into a conversation, and say, Jocelyn was just telling me the funniest thing, but it felt like a spotlight, exposing how dull and awkward I was in comparison. I could see the polite smiles on his friends' faces. In my head, I knew they were wondering what a guy like him was doing with someone like me. I became a footnote in the story of his life, his socially anxious girlfriend. And slowly, insidiously, a dark, ugly thought began to take root. His light wasn't illuminating me. It was just casting a longer, darker shadow where I was forced to stand. The whole thing was building towards Ethan's annual summer party. I dreaded it for weeks. It was the social event of the year for their friend group, and for me, it was my own personal Super Bowl of anxiety. In the car on the way there, I was already performing. I was the cool girlfriend, smiling, laughing at Aiden's jokes, pretending I was excited. He squeezed my hand. You look amazing, Jose, they're all going to love you. He meant it, which almost made it worse. He had no idea he was leading me into a lion's den. The moment we walked through the door, he was gone. Not physically, but his attention shattered into a million pieces, a prism refracting his light onto every single person in the room except me. He was immediately swallowed up by a wave of backslaps and joyful shouts of his name. I stood there, holding 2 drinks he'd handed me, a useless prop in a play I hadn't been cast in. After a minute that felt like an hour, he remembered I existed, turning back to give me a quick, apologetic smile before being pulled into another story by another friend. I found a spot on the edge of the patio, a safe little island in a sea of laughter and conversation. From there, I had a perfect view of the show. And it was a show with Aiden as the undisputed star. I watched him effortlessly move through the crowd, a hand on this person's shoulder, a shared, knowing laugh with that person. He was a master, and I was a clumsy amateur who didn't even know the rules of the game. Every time he laughed, a knot of pure, unadulterated envy tightened in my stomach. Why was it so easy for him? Why did I feel like I was trying to breathe underwater while he was basking on the shore? That's when the idea, slick and poisonous, began to slide into my mind. It started as a whisper of self-pity. He doesn't even see you. You could disappear right now and he wouldn't notice for an hour, but then it twisted into something uglier, something active. What if I made him see me? What if I forced everyone here to see me? I wasn't just a guest, I was his partner. My feelings were supposed to matter. His social life, this constant, glittering performance, it wasn't just fun and games, it had a cost. And I was the one paying it in sleepless nights and annoying sense of worthlessness. The narrative began to write itself in my head. I wasn't the insecure girlfriend. I was the victim. He wasn't the life of the party, he was the neglectful partner whose social addiction was destroying my mental health. It was a brilliant, tragic role, and I knew just how to play it, but I needed fuel. I walked to the makeshift bar and poured a glass of vodka, topping it off with a splash of soda. The first one went down fast, a harsh burn that I welcomed. The second one was easier. By the third, the anxious edges of the world were starting to soften. The loud music wasn't a threat anymore, it was a soundtrack. The knots in my stomach were uncoiling. The poisonous idea no longer seemed poisonous, it seemed like justice. It seemed like the only way out. I was going to turn this entire party into my stage, and by the end of the night, everyone, especially Aiden, would finally understand my pain. With the vodka humming in my veins, I felt a surge of righteous power. I wasn't going to be a wallflower anymore. I was the main character. I waited for the perfect moment when Aiden was standing in the center of the living room, surrounded by his inner circle, holding court with some animated story. The music had dipped slightly between songs. It was perfect. I pushed my way through the small crowd, deliberately stumbling a little for effect. Aiden, I said, my voice louder than I intended, sharp enough to cut through the chatter. He turned, his smile faltering slightly when he saw the look on my face. Jose, hey, you okay? No, Aiden, I said, letting a tremor creep into my voice. I'm not okay. I'm really, really not okay. The circle of friends went quiet. Everyone was looking at us now. This was it, showtime. What's going on? He asked, his voice low, trying to steer the conversation into a private space that I was determined to blow wide open. What's going on, I announced to the room, is that I'm having a panic attack. Again, because we're here, because you always have to be here surrounded by all of this. I waved a hand vaguely at the people, the room, his entire life. Jocelyn, let's go outside and talk, he pleaded, reaching for my arm. I snatched it away. No, I'm tired of talking in private where you can just say I'm sorry and then do it all over again next weekend. I want everyone to know. I could feel tears, real or manufactured, I wasn't sure, welling in my eyes. Do any of you know what it's like to love someone whose biggest priority is being liked by everyone else? To feel like you're competing with every single person in a 100-mile radius for 5 minutes of his undivided attention. The silence in the room was absolute now. It was thick with embarrassment. People were staring at their shoes, at the ceiling, anywhere but at us. I had their attention, I had all of it. I turned my full fury on Aiden. You drag me to these things, knowing how much it worsens my anxiety. You tell me it'll be fine, but then you just leave me in a corner to fend for myself while you play the social butterfly. Is my mental health just an inconvenience to your social calendar? Aiden, do you even care that you're doing this to me? His face had gone completely pale. The friendly, open expression was gone, replaced by a mask of stunned disbelief and something else, a deep, profound humiliation. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at his friends, seeing his own shame reflected in their awkward, pitying eyes. I had taken something private, our struggles, my insecurities, and I had turned it into a weapon, using it to publicly shame him in front of the people whose opinions he valued most. In that moment, I wasn't his partner. I was his antagonist, his accuser, and the architect of his most public disgrace. And in my drunken, twisted mind, it felt like a victory. The party died a quick, awkward death. People started inventing reasons to leave, offering hushed goodbyes to Ethan, their eyes carefully avoiding the toxic crater I had created in the middle of the living room. Aiden didn't say a word, he just stood there frozen until the room was nearly empty. Then, with a mechanical sort of calm, he took my arm. His grip wasn't angry. It was detached, like he was handling an object, not a person. We're leaving, he said, his voice flat and unrecognizable. The car ride home was the loudest silence I have ever experienced. I was coming down from my drunken high, and the triumphant righteousness was being replaced by a creeping, nauseous dread. I kept replaying the scene in my head, my own voice echoing in my ears. It sounded so much uglier now, so much crueler. I risked a glance at Aiden. He was staring straight ahead at the road, his jaw so tight I could see the muscle twitching in his cheek. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. When we got back to our apartment, I expected the explosion. I braced myself for the yelling, the accusations, the fight that had been brewing for months. But it never came. He walked in, dropped his keys in the ceramic bowl by the door with a clatter that sounded like a gunshot in the silence, and went straight into our bedroom. I followed him, my heart hammering against my ribs. Aiden, say something, yell at me, please. He didn't look at me. He just pulled his duffel bag from the top of the closet and laid it on the bed. He opened his drawers and started taking out socks, t-shirts, underwear, folding them with a calm, deliberate precision that was terrifying. What are you doing? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He finally stopped and looked at me. The disappointment in his eyes was a physical blow. It was so much worse than anger. I can't do this anymore, Jocelyn. Do what? We can fix this. I was drunk. I didn't mean it. You meant every word, he said, his voice quiet but absolute. You stood in a room full of our friends, people I've known for years, and you turned your anxiety into a weapon to humiliate me. You made me out to be a monster because I have friends. Because I like to see them. He shook his head, a look of genuine, pained confusion on his face. There are lines you don't cross, and you just sprinted across one, screaming in front of everyone. You can't do that to someone you're supposed to love. He zipped the bag closed. He walked past me, carefully avoiding any physical contact, as if I were contaminated. He paused at the door, his back to me. It's over. And then he was gone. The click of the door latch echoed through the apartment, sealing the silence in with me. It was the sound of my entire world ending. The next morning, after discovering the empty apartment and his final clinical text message, a frantic, animalistic panic took over. I called him straight to voicemail. I called again, voicemail. After the fifth try, I realized he'd blocked my number. The finality of it stole my breath. I sent a barrage of texts, a chaotic mix of apologies, accusations, and desperate pleas. I'm so sorry, I was drunk. How could you just leave? Please, Aiden, we can talk about this. I love you. None of them delivered. My mind raced. I needed an intermediary. Ethan, of course, Ethan. He was Aiden's best friend, but he'd always been kind to me. He would help, he had to. I called him, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. He answered on the second ring, his voice wary. Jocelyn. Ethan, thank God, I sobbed, the relief so overwhelming it came out as a desperate wail. You have to talk to him. He left. He blocked my number. He won't talk to me. You have to tell him how sorry I am. There was a long pause on the other end of the lines. I could hear him sigh, a heavy, tired sound. Jose, I don't think that's a good idea. No, you don't understand. I messed up. I know I did, but I can fix it. I just need to talk to him. Fix it? Ethan's voice sharpened, losing its gentle edge. How are you going to fix what you did last night? We were all there, we all saw it. You didn't just have a fight, you staged a public execution. The bluntness of his words felt like a slap. I was just trying to get him to listen. By accusing him of worsening your anxiety in front of 20 people, he cut in, his voice laced with an anger I'd never heard from him before. Jocelyn, for 2 years, all he's done is try to build you up. He turned down guys' trips because you felt anxious about being alone. He left parties early because you were uncomfortable. He spent hours reassuring you that his friends liked you, that you belonged. He defended you, even when you were being difficult. And you repaid him by painting him as a villain to the very people he's known his entire life. He took a breath, and his next words landed like punches. We don't think you're a bad person, but what you did was cruel. You used your own pain to deliberately hurt him as much as you possibly could. He's not just angry, Jose. He's heartbroken, he's humiliated. He told me he looked at you in that moment and didn't recognize you at all. Just leave him alone. He deserves at least that much. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, his words echoing in the crushing silence of the apartment. He didn't recognize you at all. The reality of what I had done, stripped of all my self-pitying justifications, was finally laid bare. I hadn't been a victim fighting for attention. I had been the villain, and I had won. I had gotten exactly what I thought I wanted, Aiden, completely and utterly all to myself. Alone in our empty home, the days that followed bled into a gray, featureless fog. I didn't go to work. I didn't answer my phone. The apartment, once our shared sanctuary, became my prison. Every object was a landmine of memory. The coffee mug with the chip on the rim he refused to throw away. The worn spot on the couch where he always sat. The silence was a living entity, constantly reminding me of his absence. A week after he left, the agreed-upon day for him to get the rest of his things arrived. I spent the entire morning in a state of manic preparation, showering, putting on makeup, cleaning the apartment obsessively, as if a tidy living room could somehow erase the monumental mess I had made of our lives. I rehearsed speeches in my head, cycling through tearful apologies and calm, rational explanations. He texted me exactly when he said he would. I'm outside. I'll be quick. He brought Ethan with him, not for help, I realized, but as a buffer, a witness, a shield to keep me at a distance. The sight of him on my doorstep, his face polite and completely closed off, shattered what little composure I had left. He looked thinner, tired, but his eyes held no anger. They held nothing at all when they looked at me. It was a terrifying, desolate emptiness. They worked in silence, moving with an efficient, impersonal speed. Aiden went into the bedroom to pack his clothes, while Ethan handled the books and records in the living room. I just stood in the hallway, a ghost in my own home, watching the life we had built get dismantled box by box. While Aiden was in the other room, I was straightening a stack of magazines on the coffee table, my hands trembling when I saw it. Tucked inside a travel magazine was a folded piece of paper. It was a printout, 2 tickets to see the National in a city 3 hours away. The concert was for the upcoming Saturday, what would have been my birthday weekend, my favorite band. He had never said a word. It was meant to be a surprise. My knees felt weak. I sank onto the couch, the tickets clutched in my hand. This was the proof. The tangible, undeniable evidence of his love, of his thoughtfulness, of the future he was planning for us even as I was plotting his downfall. He wasn't the neglectful, selfish monster I had painted him to be. He was a man who remembered my favorite band and planned secret birthday trips. He was a man I had systematically, deliberately destroyed. When he came out of the bedroom with the last box, he saw me sitting there holding the tickets. For a flicker of a second, I saw a crack in his neutral facade, a flash of pain of what could have been. It was gone as quickly as it came. He didn't say anything. He just took the last box from Ethan, gave a final, sweeping glance around the now barren apartment, and walked out the door without looking back. That was the moment I truly broke. The hope I had been clinging to, the delusional belief that this was all a fixable mistake, evaporated. He wasn't just gone. The man I had fallen in love with, the future I had taken for granted, was gone too. And I was the one who had burned it all to the ground. The concert tickets felt like ashes in my hand. The silence that rushed back in wasn't just empty anymore, it was mocking. It was the sound of the abyss I had dug for myself, and I was finally, completely at the bottom of it. I spend my nights now not sleeping but scrolling. I scroll through his social media, through Ethan's, through all his friends' profiles. I watch him slowly reappear in photos, a weekend hiking trip, a guy's night out at a brewery. Last night there was a picture of them all at a barbecue. He was smiling. It wasn't his old, brilliant sunshine smile. It was smaller, more cautious. But it was there, and I wasn't. I'm the ghost haunting the edges of his life, watching him heal from the wounds I inflicted. This is my hell now. The stage is empty, the audience is gone, and I'm the clown left alone in the dark, endlessly refreshing a page that shows me exactly what I lost.